Welcome, boys and girls, to the 19th episode of the Crush Cash Games series. Today's going to be some mid-stakes along with some 5-10. I'm not sure if 3-6 gets put in the mix. Thank you, everybody who has subscribed to my channel. If you haven't, please click the button. You have a chance to win a month's worth of poker coaching priced at $600 and hopefully even more valuable to you in the long run. Next week's video that I release, I'm planning on it being a podcast. I have an interview lined up, and hopefully all goes well and I can figure out the editing process and be a good interviewer, get a really good story to post for you guys for next Friday. And on Monday, the video vault should still be a training video just like this one. So please, whenever I do release the podcast next week, give me your feedback. Let me know what you think. Let me know if I did a good job, what questions I could have asked that you really wanted to know the answer to. I tagged this particular video as being good, so hopefully we get a lot of action, we get a lot of interesting spots to talk about all throughout. Looks like we're going to be cold 4-betting. Kind of a risky play considering that the 2 seed is a short stack, like I said. And also it's risky because, the 4 seed is 3-betting a short stack. So we would think that he would not exactly have a bad hand. So I can't really say that I agree with that cold 4-bet with the king jack, but as it turns out, not so bad. A6 versus king jack. Unfortunately, we would really very much prefer that the short stack folds his A6 type hands instead of getting it in, but Queen 6 suited in the small blind, not really strong enough to 3-bet. Don't really have much information on our opponent in the 5 seat. If he were inclined to fold to c-bets very often and maybe or not defend versus 3-bets, then we can think about adding in some 3-bet bluffs. But with the limited information that we have, we're just gonna fold our marginal. I mean, I guess Queen 6 suited isn't really even a marginal type hand. It's not a very good hand. But when we do get marginal hands like Ace 10, stuff like that. I guess Ace 10's Ace 10 we should be 3-betting, but King 9, we'll call that the cutoff. King 10. I think King 10 is probably not going to be good enough to 3-bet. Isolating with the deuces, that seems perfectly reasonable versus a pre-flop limper. We have initiative, we have some set value. There's a lot of good things we have going on for us. And position. Generally, after an under the gun limper, I open most of my full range to isolate, the range that I would be opening anyway. If the limper is, say, like an absurd VP, like playing 70% of hands, 75% of hands, then I'm gonna widen my opening range, and I'm really gonna pay attention to how my opponents react to my widened opening range, because eventually they're going to catch on and they're going to combat us. So how do we deal with that aggression? It's like they know what we're doing. We know what the under the gun's doing. Our opponents know what we're doing, and we know what they're doing. So how do we create a strategy that's going to make them back off? defending ace-8 suited in the big blind. Gonna be doing that all day. Folding the ace-jack off to a cutoff raise. That feels a little nitty. We could definitely be adding that into our 3-bet range. We could easily be flatting it just because the 1-seat is, appears to be a fishy type player and is likely to peel with really awful hands. So I think I like calling with the ace-jack better than anything else. Calling, 3-betting, and then folding as our last option. And naturally, that's the one that I took. Flop the nuts at the top left. We opted to check back the flop to kind of cap our range. Generally, opponents, when they do have some sort of equity, when they have a pair, they're going to be betting that particular board very, very, very often. When he checks, he's really limited himself to 1-pair type hands that we're not going to be getting 3-bets out of anyway. So our best line in this moment for me was check back the flop, use a little deception, and hope to get paid 2 bets out of 1 pair. Once the heart comes in on the turn, then we have to bet for protection for his 1-pair and heart type hands. The river sizing, I chose an overbet because our range is perceived as capped. We don't have sets. We don't have 2-pair. He's not, a set straight is a very small portion of our range. He's not going to really think that we have a flush draw. A hand that he might think we have with the overbet here would be pocket 5s. That hand is definitely possible. Potentially 6-8. But we may very well be betting 6-8 on that board. So I just thought the overbet looked super bluffy. Oftentimes, my thought is, obviously, like, we want our opponents to get it in there. Like, we want to just be able to flop the nuts and get it in. But, our goal should be to extract as much value as possible. And for me, in that moment, that was the line that I felt I could get the most value out of my hand. Maybe we shouldn't be doing it every time, but I don't think we should be doing anything every time. I don't think that we should be always betting the nuts there. I don't think that we should always be checking back with our marginal hands, like so. Get 3-bet on the button. For sure, going to be 4-betting this very often. As I've said, players tend to 3-bet us on the button pretty light and open themselves up to getting 4-bet. The thing about the anonymous tables is that our opponents, they don't really know, they don't have historical stats on us to know how often we're 4-betting. So we can really use that to our advantage if the collective field isn't 4-betting that often. Because against us, 5-bet shipping, a lot of air, or a lot of a decently wide range is probably going to be pretty profitable, but they don't really know that it's us. Not going to be defending hands like the queen jack off at the top left. Not going to be 3-betting them, especially with our stats. I think, we've been 3-betting a lot already. And we probably have even though it's only 18 hands, we probably have a reckless image. And we have to keep in mind that when opponents make a snap judgment, that we can be somewhat reckless. We don't really want to start 3-betting light out of the blinds, incentivize them to be flatting our 3-bets and then floating us on a lot of flops and or raising us. Nines on the button. If the 5 seat opens, we're probably just going to flat. Alright, we open ourselves. If we flat with the 9s on the button and then say the 2 seat squeezes, we're for sure calling. I feel like we're doing very well against his squeeze range. We're in position. The only real thing he's got going for him is initiative. Checking back the queen high board. Probably should have thrown a c-bet out there. Tough to c-bet the turn. He's going to be checking all his aces and his queens, hoping to squeeze a bet out of us, and we don't really want to oblige him. Especially when we can be drawing, very close to dead. Ace king on the button. If we get 3-bet, we're going to be 4-betting this all day long. Interesting opponent at the bottom left, the 6 seat. He appears to be playing lots of hands, not raising pre very often, and then not folding to continuation bets so often. So typical goal against a guy like that when we're out of position is just raise the top part of our range and make hands and get paid off. I think that's we just go back to an ABC style of poker. The podcast on next Friday is going to cover, a wide range of topics. It's going to be one of my best friends in the world. He's an amazing poker player. Has always won at a super high rate. Cash game player, so flies under the radar. But the stories that he has, just coping with Black Friday. Having a family, raising a family in poker, and poker being, our only source of income for the last really long time. I accidentally messed with my video right there, so if there's a little hiccup in the audio, that's why. Let's see. Flopping the flush at the bottom right. Can't get any action. That's pretty sad. Opted to try to set mine at the top right because we raised under the gun and we got 3-bet from the blind. I think that for the most part that's going to be at the top of his range. I think we do have a lot of implied odds there versus a lot of other spots that we might try to set mine. Cold 4-betting here with the aces. One of my favorite spots to cold 4-bet. And that's because it gets a lot of folds. So unfortunately, I'm not too optimistic that we're going to get a lot of action with these aces. So As soon as I say that, naturally, he just goes ahead and peels out of position. Checking back the ace-high flop. We could have c-bet it. I don't think he expects us to c-bet our aces a ton. I would think he would expect us to bet heading on the turn with our aces, so I think that I don't know. I don't think there's any way to get any action out of him no matter what. I think that he probably just had a pocket pair and wanted to peel. So the best way to make him spew probably would have been to just bet the flop kind of small, with him expecting us to take kind of a pot control line with our top pair type hands. That's just putting a lot of pressure on him and our profitability. You know, it's got to come from when he basically spews. We're hoping to induce a spew because our hand is so monstrous. Open-end straight flush draw at the top right. Obviously, we're going to be raising that. We need to have these huge type combo draw type hands in our range. Getting 3-bet after isolating the limper, I do believe we're going to be getting 3-bet pretty light here. It looks like we decided to peel. Don't really know how he's going to react to a peel. Yeah, instead of flatting here, we're opting to just go ahead and put in the raise. There's about 400 in the pot. We're risking 360 to win 400. When we flat, I feel like we induce a lot of bets on the turn. It looks like we have a lot of pocket pairs, so he's going to just continue firing with some hands that we beat, like king, queen, queen, jack, jack 10, and some hands that beat us, ace, queen, and ace, king. We really want to put him in a spot where he needs to have some equity in order to just bet 3-bet, get it in on the flop. If he doesn't have any equity, then we seize initiative, we take the pot, and if he jams, then, you know, we fold our little ace 10 high. Our raise on the flop only has to work less than 50% of the time to be profitable, and because his range is so light, based on the fact that we isolated a limper, he 3-bet us, we assume he's going to be 3-betting us pretty light there, simply because he thinks we're going to be isolating pretty light. He's just not going to have a hand that's able to continue very often. As for what we're repping, I mean, we can have overpairs, we can have nut flush draws, we can have a lot of things that do have a lot of equity. So I think him just getting it in blindly with ace king or ace queen or whatever is just going to be a pretty big spew. All right, we got something going on a lot of tables. We river to set and got no action. Flop trips at the top left. Looks like we opted to kind of donk into the pre-flop raiser. Not really. I don't think that the 5-seat is going to give us a ton of credit. When we bet the turn here, especially, like, since we checked back the 10-8 earlier, he's not going to, I don't think he's going to expect us to play a big hand super straightforward. I think that he's going to think that we have a decent amount of, like, sixes in our range, some straight draws, obviously not very many queens. I think the wheels are turning in his head, and hopefully he gets out of line. Hopes are dashed. I would really like to know what he folded there. Maybe some sort of small pocket pair that he was considering turning into a bluff, or merging kind of. If he raises, then maybe he gets to fold out a lot of our sixes, and maybe I call with some of the straight draws. Limping with the queen eight suited, fully expecting the big blind to be raising kind of light there. We get a peel. With our top pairs, our aces, we're going to be checking a lot of the time. These guys know that. So I feel like they're less inclined to bluff. If he does bet the flop, we are going to be calling, and the game plan is on a check turn, we're going to be betting the river kind of small and picking up the pot more often than not. The fact that he checks back the flop leads me to believe that he could very well have some aces in his range. Although that seems to be, the play, the flavor of the week. On all ace-high boards, guy in position checks back to better represent the ace later on. So it's possible maybe he's just looking for two checks from us and then is taking a small stab at the pot. Queen 9 suited, I like the hand, but not going to be playing it versus an under-the-gun raise, especially when the button and the small blind are going to be 3-betting pretty often. That's something we really need to take into consideration. When we're peeling, when we decide to flat instead of 3-bet or fold, we need to take the squeeze potential into consideration behind us and react accordingly. Getting 3-bet from the small blind. Again, we're 4-betting, and that worked out about as poorly as it can work out. Just snap 4-bet over the top. We turn another set at the bottom left. Just going to continue firing. Double flush draw board with the kings. So at this point, he's repping 7s, 5s. At the top right, he's repping a pretty narrow range, 7-5 some. This guy hasn't folded to hardly any c-bets. So we opt to flat. He does have some flush draws in his range. He also has some other things. Once we flat the turn, I don't think he's going to be just blindly shipping the river with his busted straight draws and stuff like that. I think that he realizes our range is uncapped. So if he does ship the river, then I think we can find a fold with a set of kings, frankly. I think it's very tough for him to value bet ship a set, knowing that we have tons of flush draws in our range. And it's also very hard for him to ship a busted straight draw like 8-9, knowing that, again, we have tons of flushes in our range and he's just going to get snapped. And also we have sets and all kinds of things. with the king's hand too, I did consider bet 3-betting the flop, but the main reason why I did not was that the 6 seat hasn't folded to any c-bets yet. There's a really good possibility that he can be kind of spewing and giving us a bet on the turn with hands that have very, very little equity. And if we bet 3-bet the flop, we're eliminating all those spewy, spazzy type hands and getting action from the hands that actually we're not doing so well against. I don't love the tens at the top left. This guy seems to be pretty fishy. Opening pot under the gun. His range is going to be pretty strong. And now getting 3-bet from the blinds, I think that range has to be really strong as well. As it turns out, we just binked a little set there, but no big deal. Going to be proceeding with caution with the tens, facing an under the gun raise from a fish who up to that point hasn't shown very much aggression. Again, isolating the ace-5 suited versus a limper. And look at the 1 seed at the bottom left. The 1 seed is playing 7% of hands, raising with 5, 3-betting 0. This essentially gives us an extra button every round, and we really need to be taking advantage of that. That's going to be a huge deal. As a matter of fact, it looks like the button hasn't 3-bet, but only over 10 hands, and the 3 seat hasn't 3-bet either over 44 hands. So the likelihood of us getting 3-bet is going to be pretty small. We're going to have initiative and position against guys that over a small sample size are folding very often. Like, that's just going to, at the bottom left table, we have to open up our range. We have to be exploiting that. Our cards become somewhat irrelevant when we have a situation like that lined up for us. As I was saying, the project on next Friday, the next video that I released, the interview podcast with my friend, he's an amazing guy. Played competitive sports, competitive basketball his whole life, was nominated for Mr. Basketball in the state of Tennessee, always played at a super duper high level, and that really translated to his poker abilities, and he's just got an awesome story. I mean, he's an awesome guy. You're going to want to listen to the interview. And if it sucks, then I take full responsibility. It's all the interviewer's fault, not his fault. Getting 3-bet minimum, inducing us to peel with the king tray. I would say that's a pretty high equity flop for us, and we're going to be just getting it in. And we're going to be just taking the pot down. And so the ace queen off. If we get 3-bet, we're for sure going to be just flatting. We'll have position versus an aggressive opponent in a squeezy spot. So I think his range is going to be pretty light there. We're going to have him dominated. We're going to be able to put him in some tough spots post flop with the ace queen off. And we're deep too. And the depth of the stacks is going to be pretty important. we can put a lot more pressure on guys when the stacks are super deep. And it looks like this video is about to end. Thank you very much for listening. As always, if you haven't subscribed, just take a minute to click that little button. And I hope everybody has a great weekend. Good luck at the tables, guys. Talk to you next time.